"You won't last a week living with me," she said, her voice cold as winter glass, eyes sharp enough to slice through whatever hope I had left. I remember the silence that followed more than the words themselves. The kind of silence that makes you question every bad decision that led you to that exact moment. I was standing in the doorway of a mansion so large it didn't look real, holding a single duffel bag with everything I owned inside it. My shoes were worn at the edges. My pride was worn far worse. And yet, with my heart pounding so loud I thought she might hear it, I replied, "I'm not leaving, unless you fire me." Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of not giving up on people, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you stories that matter. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, and in the city everyone knew that name. She wasn't just wealthy, she was untouchable. CEO of a luxury design empire she built from scratch, owner of properties that stretched from coast to coast, the kind of woman magazines described as brilliant but impossible. They never wrote about the rumors though, the revolving door of assistants who never lasted more than a few days, the housekeepers who quit in tears, the chefs who swore they would rather work in a prison kitchen than in her home. When the agency called me about the position, they hesitated before saying her name. Live-in estate manager. High pay. Immediate start. Difficult employer. I didn't ask questions. I couldn't afford to. My father's medical bills were stacked on my kitchen table like a monument to failure, and the landlord had already slipped 2 warning notices under my apartment door. The first time Eleanor looked at me, she didn't see a person. She saw a risk. I could feel it. Her mansion was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the walls were trained not to echo. White marble floors reflected the morning light, chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, and every surface looked untouched by fingerprints or warmth. She walked around me slowly, assessing. I was 28, college-educated but drowning in debt, recently fired from a corporate job that downsized without mercy. I needed this more than my pride could admit. She finally stopped in front of me and delivered her warning with that icy calm. "You won't last a week living with me." It wasn't a threat. It was a prediction. The first night proved she might be right. She handed me a printed schedule that read more like a military operation plan than household instructions. Meetings, inventory checks, staff coordination, vendor negotiations, event preparations. She expected perfection. At 5 a.m. sharp, my alarm blared, and by 5:05 she was already in the kitchen, dressed in a tailored suit, reviewing documents while sipping black coffee. I learned quickly that she tolerated no excuses. A vase placed half an inch off-center on the dining table earned me a lecture about standards. A delayed grocery delivery was treated like a betrayal. By the 3rd day, my body felt like it had run a marathon. By the 4th, I found myself staring at my reflection in the guest bathroom mirror, whispering that I couldn't fail. Not this time. But what made it harder wasn't her strictness. It was the loneliness that hung around her like perfume. The mansion was full of expensive things but empty of laughter. No family photos on the walls. No signs of visitors. Just awards, framed magazine covers, and art pieces that probably cost more than my entire student loan debt. Late at night, when I finished my rounds checking security systems and locking doors, I would sometimes see her sitting alone in the library, staring at a single photograph she kept tucked inside a book. She never noticed me watching. Or maybe she did and chose not to react. On the 5th day, everything nearly collapsed. A high-profile dinner party she had been planning for weeks went disastrously wrong when the catering company canceled last minute due to a kitchen emergency. I saw panic flicker across her face for the first time. It was brief, but it was there. She started making calls, her voice sharper than ever, but every solution seemed to fall apart. Without thinking, I told her I could handle it. I had grown up helping my mother cook for church events, learned to organize chaos in small kitchens with too many demands and not enough hands. She looked at me like I had just volunteered to pilot a crashing plane. But she had no choice. For the next 6 hours, I didn't sit down. I coordinated local chefs, rearranged the dining layout, improvised a menu with available ingredients, and personally plated every dish with shaking hands. When the guests arrived, investors, media executives, city officials, the house looked flawless. The food was praised. The wine flowed. Laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for years. Eleanor watched from the end of the table, her expression unreadable. At the end of the night, after the last guest left and the staff cleaned up, she stood in the foyer and looked at me differently. Not warmly, but differently. The next morning, she didn't criticize the angle of the flowers. Instead, she asked about my father. It caught me off guard. I told her the truth, that he had worked construction his whole life, that his body gave out before his spirit did, that hospital bills don't care how hard someone once worked. She listened quietly, arms folded. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered something else. She adjusted my salary, citing performance-based revision. It was more than generous. It was life-changing. I realized then that her coldness wasn't cruelty. It was armor. Weeks turned into months. The mansion began to feel less like a battlefield and more like a home in transition. I learned her rhythms. She learned mine. I discovered she hated silence during thunderstorms and would work through the night just to avoid remembering something tied to rain. I discovered the photograph in her library was of a younger Eleanor beside a man with warm eyes and paint on his hands. He had been an artist. Her fiancé. He died in a car accident on a stormy night 5 years ago. The empire she built afterward wasn't just ambition. It was grief turned into productivity. Control became her shield against loss. One evening, during a heavy storm, the power flickered and went out. Backup generators failed to kick in immediately. The mansion, for the first time, went completely dark. I found her standing in the hallway, visibly shaken. Without thinking about professionalism or boundaries, I lit candles and sat with her in the living room. We talked. Not about business. About fear. About the strange guilt of surviving someone you loved. She told me she pushed people away because losing them hurt too much. I told her staying distant didn't protect her from loneliness. It just guaranteed it. That night changed everything. She began allowing small imperfections in the house. Fresh flowers that weren't perfectly symmetrical. Music playing softly in the mornings. She even hosted a charity art exhibit in honor of her fiancé, something she had avoided for years. She asked me to help organize it, not as an employee, but as someone she trusted. When the event opened, the mansion felt alive in a way it never had. Paintings lined the halls. Guests admired not just her success, but her vulnerability. She gave a speech that trembled at first but grew stronger with each word. She spoke about love, loss, and the courage to keep building even when your heart feels broken. I realized then that I hadn't just been fighting to keep a job. I had been fighting to stay in a place that needed healing as much as I did. My father's health improved with better treatment. My debts slowly shrank. But more than that, I found purpose again. And Eleanor found something she hadn't allowed herself in years: connection. Almost a year after I first stood in her doorway with a single duffel bag, she called me into her office. The same room where she once predicted my failure. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. She said she had been wrong. Not about the difficulty, but about me. I had lasted. Not because I was unbreakable, but because I chose not to walk away when it was easier to quit. Before I tell you how this story truly ends, I want to ask you something deeply from the heart. If this journey has touched you even a little, if you've ever felt underestimated or pushed away, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep spreading stories of resilience and hope. And here's a special request: comment the word "stay" below if you believe that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to leave when life tells you to run. The final twist wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Eleanor offered me a permanent executive position within her company, not just managing her home but overseeing operations for new projects. She told me she trusted my judgment, my loyalty, my heart. The mansion no longer felt like a test I was barely passing. It felt like proof of what patience can do. On the anniversary of her fiancé's death, we stood together in the garden as rain began to fall softly. She didn't retreat inside this time. She stayed. And so did I. I often think back to that first day, to her cold warning echoing against marble floors. You won't last a week living with me. She was right about one thing, it wasn't easy. But sometimes the hardest places are the ones that shape you the most. Sometimes the people who seem impossible are simply protecting wounds you cannot see. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life, maybe two lives, is the quiet determination to say, I'm not leaving, unless you fire me. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that resilience can melt even the coldest walls, please engage with this video so more people can find it. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And remember, the next time someone doubts your ability to endure, you might just surprise them, and yourself, by staying long enough to turn pain into purpose.